Welcome to the Show with No Name podcast. I'm Renee Gartner and I'm joined by co-host today, Darcy Lussick. And in the hot seat, it is the one and only, the missile James Magnussen. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
No, we're super stoked to jump into it. Darcy looking extra brown today.
Yeah. What can I say? Being in the same.
You look like a Cheshire cat on your backdrop right now. Big smile.
Didn't get the green memo.
No, I didn't.
Mate, it was a palette of green today.
You look good today, Renee.
Thanks, darling.
You look good every day, actually.
Oh, there we go.
You too, James.
We thought we'd bring you on at the moment. The hot topic is the enhanced games, and we're eventually going to tap into that. But you are 32 and have had such a magnificent career in the swimming pool, followed that black line for a really long time and some amazing achievements. Where did it all begin for you?
Well, I grew up in Port Macquarie, so I swam from a young age. That was kind of the normal thing to do up there. But the interesting thing up in Port Macquarie was it had like a seasonal pool. So in Sydney, kids swim year round. But up there, the pool was only open, I think, between like September and April or something like that. So I swam every summer and played rugby league every winter. And that was pretty common for most kids in Port Macquarie.
Yep.
Either like some kids did nippers, but I wasn't a speedos at the beach type operator. So
So you speedos at the pool, but
and I surfed and played rugby league and swam, but was always naturally best at swimming over other sports.
Yeah.
But like most people that end up being athletes, I played everything growing up. Same sort of thing, like get out of school, get some trips away.
Yeah.
All that sort of jazz.
Anything, you'll take anything.
Yeah.
You're a big fan of the Bulldogs. Were you ever thinking that you weren't going to go the swimming way, that rugby league was going to be the direction?
There was the fork in the road for me when I was 16. So I played for the Port Macquarie Sharks. We had an awesome team and we went the whole season undefeated. And then in the grand final, go the full, I think it was 60, maybe 70 minutes in under 16s, go the whole way, leading. The siren goes. We had this Kiwi bloke playing for us who'd come from rugby union, and he was standing at lock. So the halfback feeds the scrum. The siren goes off. He pulls the ball out from lock and boots it in the air in celebration. No. And the other team catches the ball, swings it to the wing, scores in the corner, levels the scores, and in under 16s there's not too many sideline conversions, and this guy converts from the sideline. And I remember sitting there for my dad after the game, and I was just like shout out to this guy if he's listening. I know it still haunts him. Yeah, Kiwi his name was, but I remember just sitting there thinking I had absolutely no control over that outcome. And I felt really helpless. And that's what I loved about swimming. Like, it's the best and the worst thing about an individual sport. You know, at a younger age, it's all on you. When you're standing on the blocks with hundreds of millions of people watching worldwide, it's a little bit more intense. But it's a nice feeling just standing there knowing it's all on my shoulders. It's my preparation. It's my ability. It's my mindset that is on test here, and I don't have to rely on anything else. And I think for some athletes and some people, like, that drives them crazy. Yeah, they like that comfort of a team and sharing the responsibility. But for me, it fit my personality better to be going solo.
Das, were you like that with boxing? Like, obviously football was majority of your career and sort of sports, but going into that boxing mentality of having full control.
Well, yeah, it was actually quite daunting because in footy, if you have an off day, you can sort of hide a little bit. You know, you get other people to do something. If you're not playing the best, you can sort of put it on to other people. But in boxing, swimming, you go out there, it's only you. Yeah. Eyes are on you. There's no hiding. So I was happy to go back to rugby league, to be honest. Do that and then go back there. But, there's no feeling like it, is there? Like, you stand there by yourself, and then the biggest thing for me was my first fight, I knew I'd done the preparation, so I was supremely confident. Whereas the second fight, I went in there in 3 weeks and it was in the back of my mind, geez, I haven't done enough work, which I'm sure is, if you get to the Olympics and, you're there, that you've done the work. So
it's almost higher highs and lower lows. Yeah. And very few people are willing to put themselves out there that much that the full focus is on them. They can't shift any of the blame, but the rewards are, tenfold what they are in team sport.
Yeah.
I find like the big jump with swimming though is you going into that individual. You've just spoken about a pool that's open seasonal. You now would have had to have been travelling a hell of a lot more to start training day in, day out. And swimming's for lack of a better term, a selfish sport because, it starts at Sparrows and it's hours in the pool and it's a lot of mental game because it's not like you're still being able to talk to everyone else. You've just got that line that you're staring at. What was it like mentally switching completely into that?
It's tough. I think, the thing I realise now and coming back to sport, which we'll talk about a bit later, it's such a privilege to be an athlete. You take it for granted so much when you're coming through. And like, even when I retired, I was thinking about, I used to have to do ice baths every day and saunas and get massages and all this stuff. And you go, I've got to hang around an extra half an hour and get a massage. Then you retire and you're like, $150 for a massage. Now every bastard out there is paying to do ice baths. I hated ice baths. I hated them. And then I found myself 5 years into retirement paying to do ice baths. It's like, wow, life is so weird. But as an athlete, it's such a privilege, but you don't realize at the time. Yeah. And everyone always spoke to me about, it's so tough. You're making so many sacrifices and that sort of thing. And, I see in life outside of swimming, like my girlfriend's a lawyer and she goes to work at like 7 a.m. and gets home at like 7 p.m.
Yeah.
And people think I made sacrifices going and hanging out with like 10 other young blokes all day, like talking shit and like training and throwing weights around. I didn't go to as many parties. I didn't, travel as much as a young guy, for fun. But I kind of think that the average person makes a lot more sacrifices in their life than I did as an athlete.
Sure. Yeah.
I loved my lifestyle.
Yeah.
And even though I wasn't going out Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, I had weeks at the Olympic Village. Like,
actually,
I'll trade one for the other.
I'm going to get. I've got a few questions about that later, so we'll come back to that one.
Darcy's like, I'm on. It's my time to shine. What was it like your first call up into? I think was it the World Champs you sort of went into first? Wasn't it?
My first one was a Commonwealth Games when I was 18.
Wow.
So I was fresh out of Port Macquarie. As soon as I finished school, I left home and moved to Sydney. To give it a crack. With no plan B really, which has kind of been my way in life. I feel like if I give myself a plan B, then it's a way out, and I like to have nothing to fall back on. To the point where sometimes in my career I've put myself out there so much that people love to have a crack at you if things don't come off the way you want. But that's my life. I can sleep better at night knowing that I put myself out there. I put everything on the line and I don't have a plan B.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And I pretty much made it straight into the Australian team at 18, which is not crazy young for a swimmer, but it was super young for what I was doing, which is sprint freestyle, which is kind of like a man's event, I guess. So that was, that was pretty cool. But I came just at the back end of the sort of initiation phase where you had to sort of earn your stripes on the swim team. So I had like some super interesting initiations and that sort of stuff, which by the time I was older, I was like, right, my turn. And they're like, no, this shit doesn't fly anymore. You can't, like, there's no such thing on the swim team anymore.
Okay. And what was an initiation for you?
One of my first ones was the older boys on the team were in San Diego training. And after training, they said, grab your passport and meet us in the hotel foyer. And I was like, all right, a bit weird. So I meet them and these guys were probably all in their 30s.
Right.
And I was 18. So I was like pretty starstruck, but I was stoked because the boys were including me. Anyway, we get in this van and like I didn't have my bearings in America anyway. I don't realize until we're in the customs line that we're going into Mexico. And they took me into Tijuana, which is just across the border of Mexico. And it's like middle of the day. And they take me into this strip club. Like it's super quiet and like really sketchy looking Mexican dudes in there and stuff, and just
Darcy probably knows.
That's what I said. It's called Hong Kong.
I don't know what it's called, but just the roughest looking chicks and stuff as well.
That's Hong Kong.
But like all of that stuff, like exposing me to that because I was 8, I'd barely been out of Port Macquarie.
Yeah.
and then like finding myself in like the middle of a strip club in Tijuana, and they were like paying for dancers and stuff like that. Like it was pretty, pretty out there stuff. But, and I, you know, I was speaking to people when I got home about it, like, oh, that's a bit rough. And I was like, mate,
it was the best.
The boys were like accepting me. It was the best. Like these guys, I'd watched some of these guys at the Sydney Olympics.
Yeah.
And then they were taking me into strip clubs in Tijuana. So I was like, grouse.
So tight now, What were you most in awe of when you went in? Like saying that you're an 18-year-old with some of these 30-year-old Sydney Olympians.
You know what happened? So 2 years later, leading into the London Olympics, Ian Thorpe and Michael Klim made comebacks. And Michael Klim was probably my favourite swimmer when I was growing up. And, it, you know, obviously everyone was well aware of Thorpe. And so I got to race both of those guys at the London Olympic trials. And that was probably the biggest pinch yourself moment for me because I'd grown up watching them. They'd come back and, you know, they were a bit older and I was at the peak of my powers. So it felt a little bit unfair in that way. But that was a really cool moment. And then internationally, like, you know, one of the first people I ever got to race, one of my first international races was against Michael Phelps.
Yeah.
Like there was crazy moments like that during my career when I look back on it and I was like, I was 18 racing Michael Phelps. Like that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
But it all just happens so fast. You get caught up in the moment. You don't even think about it at the time.
I know looking across at Darcy and I, we look like people who really go well in the pool. But we could never understand like the likes of, I think even meeting Michael Phelps for me would be insane moment. Was his aura in the pool as big for you as a competitive swimmer next to it, like someone who also competes beside him?
So I always had this mindset of try not to idolize the people you're racing.
Yeah.
Because that almost gives them a leg up on you.
Yeah.
The first time I raced him, so he famously said leading into London that he wanted to do 100 freestyle. It's like the blue ribbon event.
Get out of my race.
Yeah, so I raced him for the first time in Shanghai in 2011 at the World Champs. So I was 19 by then. And I was leading off the men's freestyle relay for Australia. It was my first World Champs. And I hadn't looked at who else was swimming against me.
Yeah.
And Phelps had this really famous thing where he was so flexible that he could slap his hands behind his back and clap them behind his back. Shit. So when he was standing on the blocks, just before they'd say, take your marks, it's dead quiet, he'd do this super loud slap and do this big like, ooh, like noise.
And that's when you
And I was standing on the blocks and I heard this like, ooh, and I was like, oh, I'm racing Phelps. And I think I beat him by about like half a second, maybe a bit more in that race, maybe almost a second. And after that race, he came out and said, I've scratched the 100 freestyle from my program. Like I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
So like that was one of my first interactions with Michael Phelps. And then I can't remember, maybe like we both got male swimmer of the meet or something like that. Then we had to go to this big event together and like they came and picked us up in golf buggies from the pool and there was just the two of us sitting in the back riding along. And again, like I was so young and wet behind the ears, I was just like, oh yeah, this is just how the world works now. Like this is this is me. But again, you know, it's not until then you come back to Australia, sitting on the couch with your mates and you're watching like Entourage or something and there's an episode with Michael Phelps and you're just like, I was with this guy, like
I could have been in the show.
But it's such a weird world you live in when you get into, you know, swimming is very international. You're rubbing shoulders with different people. You get all these strange opportunities that are hard to grasp. But at the time, I've never been a big overthinker or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I just sat and chatted with Michael Phelps like he was a normal guy. We were both sponsored by Speedo, so we used to go to different like parties and events and stuff together.
Yeah.
And that was just, it seemed normal.
Yeah.
It seemed normal. Like I've never kept in contact with him, but it seemed normal at the time.
Because, I mean, you've spoken about meeting your idols, but they're a bit more your coaches, like people that have been your coaches more than players. Is that about right?
Yeah, it was even like, say, when I first came into first grade, the players who I played with, I've been watching them from high school, you know. Like I used to go home from high school and turn the footy on Friday night footy and they were playing. And then the next minute you're playing with them and then you're having a beer with them and it's like, and then you think it's normal, and then, you sort of, you don't realise until you've sort of finished, like, far out, like, he was the man, and I'm there having a beer with him, and I thought it was normal, and, you tell your mates, and they go, no way, there's no way. But yeah, it's just sort of going back to what James was saying before about, when you retired, like, you realise how quick it goes, didn't you? Like, and you didn't really I didn't fully embrace it when I was, when I was.
Embrace it?
Well, I embraced it in sort of in the wrong ways at times. Now I think, do I really need to drink every weekend? You know what I mean? Like, do I really need to do that? Because you're retired for a long time, and I'm actually jealous that you're coming back. Like it's because sometimes I think. I wake up and I go, I wonder if I still got it, but I definitely know I still wouldn't have it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm pumped for you. It's
the crazy thing that any athlete I speak to, and at SEN I work with like Fletch and Joel Kane and Matty Johns and all those guys. Everyone says the same thing. Pretty much every athlete says the same thing. They wish they could put their current head on their 20-year-old shoulders. Like when you're 20, you can train every day. You don't get DOMs. You're like. Life is good. Yeah. But you're a dickhead. Yeah. Really. Well, guys are. Guys are.
Girls are much the same. We're much the same. Yeah.
And in retirement, you just have all this perspective. Yeah. And also, you just know how to handle moments better. Yeah. Handle media better. Handle tough conversations with managers or sponsors or work or employers. You just better at life than you were at 20. But your 20-year-old body is just indestructible. It's indestructible. So that's like this really cool opportunity, and the perspective I'm looking at it from with the enhanced games is beyond, the performance enhancing aspect. Basically what I want to do is get my body back to that 20-year-old indestructible self with this current head on my shoulders. And I just think that's such a cool opportunity that I don't think there's ever been anything like this before.
Yeah. And we'll dig a little bit more into that shortly, because I have so many questions and it's so wild. But I mean, you've come from a sport that is, it was such a clean sport, but you went up against some swimmers that have since, it's now come out that, they were drug induced and, they were doing everything they could to sort of cheat the systems in so many ways. And I know even on when I think it was the London Olympics when you came through, and it was one of the Chinese team.
Yeah, there was people. It was a couple of swimmers that I swam against. Even I don't know if you watched the Icarus documentary. Yeah. But at the end of the documentary, they basically run through all the names of the Russian athletes that had since tested positive. There was like 2 or 3 that I raced during my career. Some of them were in the Russian relay team that beat us. In London. Basically, as a swimmer, and not really any swimmers mid-career will admit to this, because essentially it's just a distraction. If you go into every race thinking like there's people in here, like this isn't an even playing field, like woe is me, then you're lost. Like you have to go in there backing yourself saying, I'm the best here, regardless of what people are taking, how they're training, whatever. Like I'm just backing myself. But any race that you go into, you know that there's certain athletes, certain countries that it's more likely than not that it's not an even playing field.
So is that just accepted? Sorry, Das.
I guess so. Yeah. I guess so. We just back ourselves as Australians that we have better coaching, better facilities, better technique, better skill acquisition, like all those intangibles that can't be enhanced medically. Yeah. That's how we back ourselves, and we've done it for a long time, and we've got the results on the board. But even that's just in the cocoon of swimming. You go across to some other sports. Like
athletics,
you look at athletics, cycling, weightlifting, and you just go, oh, it's even more rife. Yeah.
So from an outsider sort of looking into the track and field and the swimming and stuff, I think Australia, because we have a government-funded drug testing program, SADA. So as an athlete in Australia, you know that if you make one mistake or try and cheat the system, you're getting hung out to dry in front of the media. Everyone's going to know. Do you think so these other countries that they're instead of deterring their athletes from cheating, do you think there's some countries that are sort of helping their athletes cheat?
Yeah, I mean, the Icarus documentary showed that Russia was definitely doing that for a period of time. There's been lots of other cases since. It's actually, So coming through as an athlete, you don't think too deeply about it. You think it's great that we are so transparent and we're so clean. But then you sit back and think about it and think, right, how does this system work? So we put our taxpayer money into trying to catch out our own athletes and broadcast it to the world that we've got athletes that are cheating.
Yeah.
And you sit back and you think, like, shouldn't that be their job to catch us if we're going to do it?
Yeah.
And shouldn't we be spending our money sending our drug testers to other countries to catch them so they're on a level playing field with our athletes?
Yeah. It's
when
wild.
When you kind of think about it,
that's crazy.
It's really weird. And when we do catch an athlete, we put them on blast internationally. Poor Peter Boll, they didn't even test his B sample and just went boom.
Yeah.
Shayna Jack, 4-year ban straight away. Boom. We crucify our own athletes. Now, if we've got athletes that are doing the wrong thing and using performance enhancing drugs and racing clean athletes, they're doing the wrong thing, right? But sometimes I sit back and think, let WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping, let them come into Australia and catch those people. Don't spend our taxpayer money on catching our own athletes and then putting them on blast to the world.
Especially when you're like, as an athlete, you are so heavy on making sure your supplements are ASADA and waterproof. I know we met when you were with Body Science, and they're adamant, they're Australian, they're ticked in every essence. And you're sitting there going, you take this, you're like, oh, can I take this Panadol? Can I take this?
Pretty wild,
You're so like anal about it. It's
we
insane.
had to have, so I would have to provide my whereabouts every day of the year round, to the point where if it got to like 7 p.m. and I was going to the movies with my girlfriend, I'd have to jump onto the app and log that I was going to be at the movies.
Madness.
So if drug testers wanted to come to the movies and find me, they could.
Did that ever happen? Where's the weirdest place you ever got knocked on the door?
Oh, like weirdest places, like when I was single, sometimes like might have like visitors over and like a little knock on the door and a little old man comes in with a beaker and a vial for
really
drug
killed the mood,
testing.
wouldn't
Like, damn,
Sorry, babe, this doesn't usually happen.
Netflix chill testing.
Netflix chill and test.
Yeah. But it would happen like regularly because I was getting tested so much. It was insane.
Yeah.
It was insane. And WADA and ASADA wouldn't be really checking off with each other who's testing when.
Yeah.
So sometimes like I get to the pool, WADA's there, yep, sweet, bloods, urines, all of that stuff. And you have to sit there and wait with them until you can do both. Go home, like go to have a nap, boom, knock on the door. ASADA's here now. We want to take your blood. And like, I'm giving
just done it.
like 6 bottles of blood a day. Like what's going on?
Yeah.
During the London Olympics, I had to do what was called a blood passport, where every morning I had to go to the medical centre and give blood so they could see if there was any irregularities. And that was across the full 2.5, 3 weeks of the Olympics.
Yeah.
Was that everyone?
No, they just picked certain people.
Was that?
Take that as a compliment,
yeah,
huh?
100%.
Yeah, I think so.
But
I
mind
guess
you,
so.
I got drug tested when I got beaten in a fight. So that's
So really
when you
rub it
start
in.
questioning it.
Yeah.
I was like, thanks, mate.
Yeah. No, they say definitely pick certain people.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I ask, was that because the Still Knox incident happened with the crew that went to the Olympic Games for London?
Yeah.
Was that pre or post the Games?
Pre. It was about 3 weeks before.
So would you think that would have been a reason why you might have been targeted? A part of my ignorance?
No, they didn't know about that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it all came out way later. But that wouldn't show up on a test or anything like that. It wasn't a banned substance. It was back then pretty popular in the sporting world.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, Still Knox, never heard of it. And
You're like, that's our fun, guys.
But people know.
Yeah.
Like, the most disappointing thing about that at the time was like some of the ex-swimmers came out and they were having a crack at us and we're like, this has been passed down from you guys.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know what this was.
I learned this in Tijuana. What happened with that situation?
Like what happened that night?
Yeah.
So basically, like, we were in Manchester for training camp before the Olympics.
Yeah.
And so we're just, Manchester is like kind of a dull place. And basically our life was hotel, bus, pool, bus, hotel. Like we weren't allowed to go out. We weren't allowed to do anything.
Yeah.
And there was just this cocoon of pressure building. Like there was a lot of media around and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So some of the older boys on the team were like, oh, like this is a way to have a bit of a night off, I guess.
Yeah.
Like let the hair down a bit, relieve the pressure a bit. And I think there was 6 of us that were on the 4x1 freestyle relay team. And we literally sat in a hotel room and took still knocks. Over the years, it's been like people have said, oh, we're having Red Bulls. Like, didn't have Red Bulls. Alcohol, there wasn't alcohol. Like, apparently we were like running naked through corridors. Like, never happened. There was like wrestling, which happens in any like guys bonding session.
Happens in all bonding sessions, yeah.
It was like wrestling, talking shit, watching YouTube. And then we're all in bed by 10 p.m. And trained. The next day I trained some of the best I'd trained just because it was a bit of a loosen the shoulders a bit. And it was months after we got home from London. My manager called me. I was on a training camp on the Sunshine Coast. And he said, I've got wind of something. I'm not 100% sure what it is, but it's something massive involving you. And he's like, just let me know what it is. And I was like, I haven't done it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. And he's like, mate, this is, from what I'm hearing, this is huge. Like, just tell me what it is. Like, don't be ashamed. And I was like,
give me a hint.
No idea. Yeah. I'm like racking my brains. I'm like, I don't know what it is. Turned up at the pool next day and they had all those big trucks with the live broadcasting, those big poles.
Wow.
Like every station was there. They'd all like driven from Brisbane and Gold Coast and stuff. And it was like the biggest story at the time. And I was still to this day, I'm a little confused why it was such a big story. But I think it was just a point in time when, swimming was in the headlines.
Yeah.
Obviously, those stories were doing big viewings, and people just ran with it. And it got bigger than Ben-Hur. And anytime you sit down and tell people what actually happened, they're like, oh, I thought it was way worse than that.
Yeah.
Like, I remember how big it was at the time, and that was it.
Yeah, I do. I remember how massive it was. And that's why I was like, if you don't mind talking about it, like,
yeah,
I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I still am puzzled by it. But, and still people, like, whenever I talk about it, you get DMs or whatever, and people say, like, I know there was more to it and stuff. You're like,
yeah, okay, cool.
Chill.
You were there, were you? Yeah.
There's 6 dudes that know what happened.
Yeah. And that wasn't it.
Yeah, like, what's the worst we could have done to each other?
Yeah. Well.
Pretty weird, but.
Just took a weird twist.
But yeah, it did get, and I think it was just all speculation about, like, what could have happened.
Yeah.
And the most damaging thing was other swimmers that were on the team at the time were coming out saying, well, I heard this happen, and they're saying it to the media.
Yeah.
Like, but it was all just really just speculation.
That team got, like, from the outside in, it was like the team just constantly kept turning on each other, and it felt like it looked like a really toxic environment. I don't know whether it was, but it just felt
heavy. Like, and the weird thing was they kept saying, like, because this happened with this group of guys, like, the guys are toxic. But, like, we were actually all getting along really well.
Yeah.
But there was pandemonium in the team elsewhere, but it wasn't in that group.
Yeah.
We were actually kind of on the same page, which is kind of the annoying thing when it all started coming out. And there's, people have written in their books about that stuff and just missed the mark completely. Whereas I'd say one day, like, some stories will come out. But there was really big rivalries in that team from other factions.
Yeah, okay.
And we were the ones that were actually having a bonding night getting along. I was like,
you're like, why maybe you're joined us. Yeah.
Are you saying we're toxic because we didn't invite you? Like, I don't know.
Because you spoke about it, you're on SAS, which, congratulations. Like, imagine going into that absolute dive. Would you ever do SAS stuff?
Probably not.
No.
I'm retired from everything.
Yeah, okay. Done.
Yeah.
Seriously out. But you spoke about in your confessional on how much of a toll that London Games took on you.
I think just from beyond just me, like, the effect that it took on my family.
Yeah.
Because, and actually it's popped up again with this stuff now. Like, again, a lot of articles, a lot of people having their opinions and all that sort of thing. And I've learned to deal with that really well over the years. Like, I don't care what people think. And even though people don't believe that, you really do have to build this ability to not care.
Yeah.
And I've managed to do that. So if I read something, I go, nah, like, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's one thing for me to do that as the athlete and the person in the scenario, but for my mum and dad and my family to read those things about me
Yeah.
You know, that's probably a skill they've never really developed. And that was one thing that happened when all this enhanced stuff popped up. And I was like, yep, I'm going for it. And then they're like, really? Again? Do you really want to go through this? Like, can you really handle people having these opinions about you?
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, yeah, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, people think stuff anyway. It's
Yeah.
probably the same rats that are coming out of the woodwork saying stuff now. They didn't like me during my career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's new haters.
I think that's like the Australians are known for that, aren't they? Like, they're known for knocking people down, like, you know, especially athletes. And it's usually the people that have never had an ounce of athletic ability in their life. They're the first ones to knock you down.
Yeah.
But when I was driving here, I was actually thinking that. I was thinking, wonder if you thought about, before you came back, were you thinking, geez, do I want to go through all of that again?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So I had to weigh that up pretty quickly because basically they put the offer out to me like, we'll give you $1 million US to come and break the world record.
Well, there you go.
And I was like,
Darcy loves talking to numbers. So.
yeah.
He's ready to swim.
Yeah, it's a pretty big number.
Yeah.
It's like 1.6 Australian.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I had to quickly weigh up, you know, because I knew as soon as you say it, you're like, that's polarizing. That's very polarizing. Even like I had split opinions on it at first. I'm like, is this good? Is this bad? And I had to, you know, think about it pretty deeply. And I knew instantly that people were going to have opinions on it. And like life is pretty relaxing when you're not putting yourself out there. Yeah. And it's pretty easy. But also like easy is not always fun.
Yeah.
I don't mind putting myself out there. And the word that kept coming up that people kept saying to me was reputation. And I was talking to my girlfriend about it and she's like, well, what do you think about this reputation thing? And I was like, oh, my reputation. Like, what is my reputation currently? Like, or more deeply than that, what does reputation mean? I was like, when you think about it, reputation is basically people's opinion of you that don't know you.
Yep.
If I don't know them, why do I care what their opinion is of me? And so when I boiled it down, I was like, well, this reputation thing might be a bit overrated because why am I wasting my time worrying about what people I don't know think about me? And I remember when I was swimming, this was years ago, it was a really good lesson. I read this quote from Matthew McConaughey. And he said, if you don't have a person's number in your phone, then you shouldn't care for their opinion on you.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that's like, unless they know you well enough to contact you directly, then you shouldn't be worried about what they think. Worry about the people that you know and care about.
Yeah.
And it popped up again for this. I was like, you know what? And I'm of the belief that people's opinions on this will swing pretty strongly once they see it unfold, because I think it's going to be really cool.
And I think that's probably been the wildest thing. Like, to add to your own opinion, I stick by the fact other people's opinion of you is none of your business.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you make it your business, then it infers and
it
changes your reaction, changes how do you react to it. When the enhanced games popped up, like all of us in this room have been, one of them still is an athlete, but have been athletes, have worked and had to abide by the clean sports, clean feelings. And, you know, we've seen other athletes come down and get found out for being drugs, and you're like, oh my God, they've disgraced the sport. They've disgraced everything that we've trained for. So when this popped up, I was like, this is wild.
Yeah.
It's so wild. And Ben Johnson wrote it in his book, and I don't even know how old I was when I read it. It would have been like 12, 13. That's a long time ago. And he said, like, I used to use, he obviously came out, he was found to be using drugs, but I used it for my recovery. I didn't use it on day of performance. That was a way he sort of spoke about his use of it. And he said, if athletes were able to do that, imagine how much better we would be. Like, that athlete still has to have all the talent, still has to have all the work ethic. It was just helping me in those in-betweens. And I sort of sat there going, I shouldn't be saying that I'm like, oh, I understand. Because the other part of me is like devil on the shoulder going, that's bad.
Yeah.
What was your opinion? How was it brought up to you? What was your understanding of it, and how has it changed?
Because I work in the media now, I saw it in a press release that we got for work. And I read about it, and the first time I read it, I thought, like, interesting concept, but who's going to do it?
Yeah.
And then Aaron D'Souza, who's kind of the founder, and the face behind it from an organisation perspective at the moment was talking about how they believe they'll be able to break all these world records, i.e. the kind of most physical records being the 100-metre sprint in athletics and the 50-metre sprint in swimming, because that's the biggest, I guess, use of speed and power and athleticism. And I was reading it and I was talking to some friends about it, and they're like, do you think it's possible? And I said, well, who though? Who's going to break that record? Because I'm of a strong belief that you couldn't get an average athlete, give them performance-enhancing drugs, and they just come out and swim the fastest race in history. I don't think it could happen. So I was talking to my mates about it, and they said, well, do you reckon you could do it? And I was like, oh, probably. Like, would you do it? And I was like, well, like, it's all theoretical. What would you do it for? It's like, I don't know, like $1 million. And then the guys off the Hello Sport podcast rang me mid-podcast. They're like, have you heard about this Enhanced Games? I said, yep. They just chatted about it briefly. They said, what do you think about people being able to break the records? And I rolled out that same line. I said, how about this? Here's an exclusive for you boys. For $1 million, I'll come on, juice to the gills, and break the world record. Yeah. One line I regret was juice to the gills because I got run everywhere. Yeah. I'm talking like New York Times, Washington Post, BBC, Sky News. Shit. Everywhere, juice to the gills. I was like, oh.
Your mum and dad are like, oh, James.
Yeah. But I said that as a throwaway line on the show.
Yeah.
Woke up the next day and my phone was going nuts. And I was like, what is all this? Had missed calls from Aaron D'Souza himself. Get on the phone to him and he's like, I'm confirming we'll give you $1 million US to come on board and do this thing and break this record. And I was like, oh.
I said I was going to, but I was joking. I wrote it down in my diary. Veronica made a very funny joke today.
And then I had to make a super quick, like pros and cons. Can I actually do this? Who's this going to affect? Made a quick call to a few people and then came out and accepted it. And then by that afternoon, I had a live show for SEN down at North Bondi, RSL. Get down there, and again, every TV station's down there.
The Sunshine Coast all over again.
And I was just like, oh well, like let's do this thing. And I faced up to it and said, yep, I'm going to do it. And I hadn't even had enough time to completely look into it.
Yeah, that was my next question. I was like, what, how much info are you being given before
I just quickly like done a bit of a background research on the people involved in it. They gave me a couple of details that have since come to light that weren't public knowledge at that time.
Good or bad?
Good.
Okay.
So they told me basically like we've got Ridley Scott has signed on to produce a documentary for this show, and I was like, oh, that's massive. And they're like, this is going to be a huge documentary, like think Drive to Survive, like bigger streaming platforms. This event is going to be like something like nothing ever seen before. I think like the statistics, the 100 meters at the Olympic Games, I think is the second most watched event in the world. The most being the World Cup, Soccer World Cup final. I think it does 1.2 billion viewers for that 10-second race. And he's like, do you know anybody that won't watch this?
Yeah.
Like we could do 1 billion viewers for this 50 freestyle. And suddenly this would take my career that used to be here. It would be like, it's like a different world.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about this, thinking about it. I'm like, this is just such a great opportunity. I'll be stupid to turn this down. And then I've got this athlete voice in the back of my head going, mate, that 20-year-old body, like, get it back.
Did they go through in terms of the science of it? Because, like, I think the stat, and it's even on the website, if you get a chance to go and check it out on the enhancedgame.org, I think it's a website at the moment, the stat is currently 44% of athletes are using.
Crazy.
In actual competition.
And that was an internal survey done by the International Olympic Committee of current athletes.
Which is wild.
44% of them, even the 44% of them admitted
on
the survey that they were currently using performance-enhancing drugs when they were competing.
Wouldn't you be like every survey I do, even if it's a work survey, I'm like, this is not anonymous.
Yeah. Well, you know, when you go to the doctors and they ask you some questions and you're like, nah.
I have 3 drinks. I average 3 drinks on a weekend.
Yeah. It's wild. But, and again, my only experience is in swimming.
Yeah.
And in Australia more specifically. So I know the context there. But again, when you think about some of those other sports out there, maybe that's not so crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have they spoken too much about the terms of the science of it being like Flojo was one athlete that comes to mind who there was a lot of questions. She died really young. They've said it was an epileptic fit, I think, in her sleep, but they said her heart was really large, which would have been steroids. So a lot of speculation and whatnot.
Yeah.
Does it scare you to start putting things through your body that aren't, you know, like 20-year tested, 40-year tested to know the sort of effects? Or is it?
I think the good thing about this is it's going to bring it out of the shadows, and I'm not going to be getting dodgy supplements from the boot of a gym junkie at the local Fitness First.
Yeah.
So I've already been in contact with some big companies in America that are in this space, which is more specifically the anti-aging space.
Yeah.
So like testosterone replacement, peptides, stem cells, things that actually are FDA approved and prescribed by doctors.
Yeah.
They're not these kind of hooky kooky, sketchy supplements that people think.
Yeah.
Because we can be open and honest about it, because I can go to a doctor and say, well, yeah, I need to get my levels to a normal level, but this is for performance. So I need you to be doing all the tests on my organs, all the tests on my bloods, my fertility, like where everything's in the open. And it's all going to be documented as well.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if Ridley Scott's following me around with a camera and I'm having adverse effects of this stuff.
Yeah.
It'd be the worst thing possible. So it's actually in everyone's best interest that I do this the most safe and effective way it can be done. And beyond the protocols and everything that they're going to be providing for me, I'm going to be bringing my own staff to the team as well to just absolutely bulletproof this thing. But it is an area, and depending on, on what content you take in and stuff like that, it's pretty common already out there.
Yeah.
Like your Andrew Hubermans and Joe Rogans of the world are already speaking openly about their testosterone use, about their peptides and stem cell use. So it's less speculative than I think, like everyone just keeps saying like, oh, you're going to be on anabolic steroids. It's like, well, that's
There's
kind
more
of,
than that.
it's an antiquated term.
Yeah.
Like anabolic steroids were probably grouse in the 80s in East Germany, but the science and the medicine has moved so far now, and there are things out there that, there's professional sports in America that are pretty loosely tested, where athletes are peaking well into their 40s.
Yeah. Can you give me your doctor's names, by the way?
Yeah. We may have already found some doctors, but I think it's a little less experimental and a little less speculative than most people think when they first hear about it.
Yeah.
So I actually don't think it's not as risky or unsafe as people think. It's out there.
Yeah.
So obviously the big question is, can you break the world record?
Yeah. Well, that was again that morning. that morning, I was like, pull my bluff.
Because you're fighting for the mill.
Yeah. I'm pretty confident now.
Yep.
So I've been back. I'm into my 9th week of training this week.
How long have you been out of the water for, technically?
Well, technically like 5 years.
Yeah.
But I've stayed in shape for no particular reason. But everything was still there, ready to go again.
Yeah.
The one difference now, obviously, like being 5 years older, just the recovery is a little bit slower. The body's a little bit sorer. But working into feeling sort of springy again and powerful. But this time around, so when my first career, like I was always top couple in the world for 50 freestyle.
Yep.
But I only trained for 100 freestyle. So I do up to 80 kilometers a week in the pool for a 47-second race. But now I'm coming back to the 50 freestyle, which I was always really good at, but never trained specifically for that. because at the time the 100 freestyle was the blue ribbon event.
Yeah.
That was the one that everyone wanted, so that's where I focused. But the difference in training now is it's like chalk and cheese. So to put it in super easy to understand terms, 100 freestyle is basically 400 on the track.
Yeah.
Remember what it felt like at the end of a 400 at school carnival? Yeah, really bad.
They're worse than an 800.
Really bad.
Yeah.
Super painful.
Yeah.
Like heaps of lactic acid, can taste blood in your lungs.
Yeah.
It's the exact same 100 freestyle.
Yeah.
Then you come back to 200 on the track, and like it hurt a little bit at the end, but really it's all momentum. Like you felt pretty good. That's the difference that I'm doing. So I don't need that that lactic acid buffering. I don't need any aerobic base, like no pointless kilometers. The only aerobic work I'm doing at the moment is walking from my car to the pool. Or my
about
car
as
to,
much as he does as well. So
It's
you
the
can
best.
do this,
I know.
Darcy.
It's the best. So pretty much my last 9 weeks has been like jumping, throwing, lifting super heavy weights and swimming full speed.
Yeah, right.
And that's what the next year is going to look like for me, which is so different to what I've done previously.
And have they done baseline testing with you? Like as soon as you're signed on to come onto into the games, will they do baseline testing? Because I've heard there's like brain scans, there's blood tests, there's heart tests. Have they done that before you've begun?
Not yet. So I've had
your
like
team have?
I've done everything internally and know that I'm full bill of health. And then I've started doing all my own testing around like strength and mobility and all that stuff. And since I retired, even the back half of my career came in a little bit, but you see it so much more now, like mobility and prehab and rehab and diet and everything is so much more important now. When it was there, but it was like a side thought when I was first competing.
Well, when my old man was playing first grade, they had a beer and a cigarette in the thing at half time. Like, now it's gone to like what Darcy had, where it was get on the drink and have a schnitty at the end of the game, to like obviously your age group where it is, you know, it's the ice bars.
And like I hated getting to training, early and stretching. That was a big bugbear of mine. And we always just spoke about like, you're a bigger guy, like mobility is not going to be a strong point for you. And there was a few different things that we spoke about when I was swimming, like that's just not going to be, you know, one of your strengths because either of your size or your some of your limitations around flexibility or whatever. But this time around, I'm like not seeing anything as a barrier. I'm like, I want to be the most mobile guy on the blocks.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm forcing myself to do like 4 or 5 hours of mobility a week at the moment. Like for this opportunity, I'm leaving no stone unturned.
I feel like you've done that your whole career, though, by everything you've said in this podcast has been, there's no B.
Yeah. That's even like, you know, I've got other businesses and stuff like that, and they're all like sitting there. I'm like, oh, I just want to swim. Because when I'm so focused on it now that, I kind of that's kind of the way I work. I want to just be mentally all in on this opportunity.
You have to be.
See, that was good. I was going to ask you that. Coming back to competitive swimming, is it mentally? Are you still got it? Like, are you excited to train? You're not sick of the black line.
Yeah, I'm kind of more excited at the moment. Oh, yeah. And again, it's only been 9 weeks.
Yeah.
We'll get you back on.
Yeah, get it back in a year.
Yeah, only 50 weeks to go. But again, it's with that perspective of, well, you know, I'm here training, but I could be working right now, doing something else.
For sure.
And when you get back to it, and this time is so different because essentially the way this is going to work, like our seasons were, you know, big training block and you'd do some racing and you might have to go to, I don't know, wherever it is, or you might have to travel internationally, do some racing. But this is basically going to be a year of training and then just in the spotlight, boom, $1 million on the line, like, let's go.
Yeah.
Which is like pretty wild.
Yeah.
Not many people get a chance to race for that much money.
Well, money at all. You've come from a sport where, I mean, we only just saw it, I think, last week or this week even, the poor gymnast, the female gymnast, she's been training for 4 years, 2 months out of the Olympics in Paris. She's done an A and gone. And you're not working, you're not getting paid. You're definitely not working during that time. You just said you're struggling to work now, 9 weeks in.
Yeah.
Like there's no money involved. And that was one of D'Souza's main comments was that our athletes deserve money, like to be able to train. That's why the $1 million is there. But is there also a wage?
Yeah, there's wages. There's Like, I can't talk about all of it, but there's a lot going on. And obviously there's the documentary.
Yep.
And there's going to be a lot of interest commercially, I think, from brands as well, disruptors in markets. We'll find those people eventually. We're working on it. But I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities.
We're going to see Prime energy drinks, aren't we?
I think there's going to be a lot of commercial interest in it as well. Particularly once there's broadcast rights done and some of the logistics come out about how this is going to be run, which is going to be so different to anything we've seen before. We're just used to seeing, when you think about the Olympics, you think about it runs the same every time, right?
Yeah.
Like, they announce the names, they walk out behind the blocks, the crowd's there. We do the race, we do a medal ceremony, a post-race interview. Nothing has to be by the tradition of the Olympics in this games. Like
sort of like a live golf.
Yeah.
100%.
That's what, is that
And
what
you know,
you're
the feel like
thinking? Yeah.
when you think about the reactions to live golf, it's pretty much mirrored this exactly.
Yeah, very
Phil
true.
Mickelson was probably the first big name to sign on, and he got hammered. And now we're 18 months down the track, and Rory McIlroy is thinking about coming across to live golf.
Yeah, and they're also anti. Like in that doco, the streaming for that all of them were like, it's disgusting, you can't go. And you spoke about reputations before and whether that was something that bothered you. What have the feedback been like with people, with your swimmers? Like, remember when we were all going through COVID testing, if you didn't get it, it was breaking friendships and relationships and stuff like that. Has there been anything like that since you've called this out to any of your swimming mates?
No, it's all been super positive. Most commonly from athletes, which I was unsure about, but all current athletes are thinking like, is this in my future? Because it's such a great opportunity. All former athletes have said to me is, I would love to have either been in the shape to be able to jump into this or been young enough to still be able to do this. Because I'm in a kind of a lucky spot where I did retire a little young at 28. So I'm not too old to be doing this, and my body's not too beat up, which is somewhat unique. And you know, a lot of swimmers let themselves go after competing. So everyone's been really positive about it. The only negative things have been certain parts of the media. But I'm also working for one side of the media, so there's going to be another side.
You can control that narrative.
It's the 100% footy versus NRL 360, right? Like, there's two sides, and once you learn in Australia, there's two sides to the media. Once you're aligned to one, the other's going to come at you. And in my case, the other one has the broadcast rights for the Olympic Games.
Of course,
So, and that's such a great thing that I have now as a perspective. I've worked in the media now. I know how this game works. I know some of the people writing negative articles may not even mean those things, but they're getting asked to write things because there's an agenda that needs to be pushed, because there's Olympic Games coming up. And I'm actually not sitting. I'm going to the Olympics to work, which is going to be so weird.
No poaching,
which is going to be so weird because there may be a point where I'm in the mix zone having to interview the 50 freestyle Olympic champion when I'm about to go and try and swim faster than they have there. But I don't know. It's a weird scenario, but it's going to be really fun. But knowing that those two sides exist and knowing that people aren't necessarily writing those articles because they do feel that way. And then I've done a few interviews where, like as part of my work now for the Enhanced Games, I've had to do international media. And like everything out there. And some of the questions have been, you know, how do you feel about the backlash? I was like, what backlash do you mean? Well, you know, the some of the things that have been written. I was like, can you talk about? And they're like, just generally, like some of the stuff. I was like, look, honestly, I can honestly say, hand on heart, I haven't encountered anyone that's come up to me in person and said, we think this is a really bad idea. I've had some pretty deep conversations with people close to me where we've had to, you know, really sit down and flesh it out. But I've not had anyone come up to me in person and say, I think this is a really bad idea, or I think you're a bad person for doing this. So most of it is just people are assuming there's backlash. It's so controversial. Like, how are you dealing with the backlash? And I'm like, doesn't really exist in my world.
Well, hand on heart, like for me, when it first came out, I was just like real torn. Like, I mean, this is before you even announced you were coming into it. And there was such a big part of me that was like, it's so dangerous. Like, it's so
That's
dangerous,
what I
the
thought
athlete,
first, yeah.
and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, and then you came out and said this. I was like, oh, now I'm really intrigued.
Yeah.
But I can have my opinion, but until I've actually asked you any questions and have any understanding, like Darcy and I both trolled like the website and just went through and got more of an understanding from that, knowing that we'd be able to ask you more questions and have more of an understanding. And like, it's not our bodies, it's you guys that are doing it. It's your choice. But I have a better understanding going out there, and we hope more people listening to this, for all our subscribers, that more people will learn, and then more questions will be asked, wanting to know the answer rather than wanting to trip you up.
Yeah, and a big part of what I'm doing is I want to be completely transparent with the whole thing. Like I want to be able to, through whatever forms of media, and of course the documentary is going to be huge.
Yeah.
Like you'll be able to see behind the scenes everything that's happening. But along the road as well, I want to come out and say, this is what I'm taking. This is how many milligrams of what I'm taking, or this is how I'm feeling. This is the effects on my body. This is the effects in the pool. This is how much extra weight I'm lifting. I just want to be 100% transparent. So for the first time ever, we can sit there and go, this is what a performance enhanced athlete looks like, a legal one. This is actually the effects on the performance. This is the actual side effects, if there are any, or this is the actual benefits. Like, everyone talks about side effects, but what about at the end of this, if I'm sleeping better, recovering better, eating healthier? Like we're talking about doing brain optimization, about red light therapy, about these biohacker like methods and stuff to reduce aging. What if I come out the back of this with a biological age of 21 and every test done on me says that I'm healthier than I was going into it?
Yeah.
Then we're all going to sit there and go, oh, like, what was...
But it'd be nice to have the money to be able to do that. I mean,
of course.
For you.
But all the conversations I'm having with the medical experts in this world, they're kind of saying to me, like, you're thinking about it wrong.
Yeah, okay.
We're going to make you healthier as a result of this, reduce your biological age and have you performing and feeling better than you ever have in your life. So it's actually the complete opposite mindset of, oh, what are going to be the negative things so I can swim faster? They're like, no, it's going to be all positive and you're going to swim faster. And that's why there's so much interest in this from some of the financial backers of the games, because they want to show the efficacy of some of the things out there and how that can be brought into the general population and used more widely. And these anti-aging clinics and the like in the States are becoming so much more popular. Yeah. Still maybe more for those athletes or celebrity space at the moment.
Well, I think Chris Hemsworth just did a fair bit of study with it, didn't he? With these, his doco.
Sure. He's looked great.
Looks like it.
Yeah.
In a few movies, he's looked good.
Yeah.
If you look like that up on there, man,
but imagine if the documentary shows that.
Yeah.
Then we're all going to sit there and go, what were we so worried about?
Yeah.
Because we're not doing it in the shadows with sketchy people. Yeah. We're doing it like legit.
What do you make of the questions that then get asked about the role models for kids? Because that's an important one. And that's not to have a go. That's
that's again something I had to get my head around.
Yeah.
So this is the best way I can articulate it. So if I've got my kid, right, and we sit down on a Sunday morning to watch sport, flick on Fox Sports, on one channel I can watch Formula One. Now, it's up to me to explain to my kid, now see how they're driving 300 kilometers an hour in that car? When we go out on the road, you don't drive 300 kilometers an hour in that car. I can flick to the other channel and watch UFC. I can say, see how Conor McGregor kicked that guy in the face? When you're on the school playground, you don't kick other kids in the face.
Darcy, listen, please.
And then you can flick over and see me swimming.
Yeah.
Say, this is the reason that, this is part of the entertainment of this sport. That doesn't mean that you then go to your local pool and do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's always really important for any parent to decipher what aspects of athletic performance are a direct role model for their child. Just because you see it on TV doesn't mean that you should mimic it.
Yeah.
If and when I believe this proves to be safe and effective and a feasible option for athletes in the future, then that's a discussion down the line. But for now, for any parents or kids, I'd say this is entertainment. This is a project, but enjoy it for what it is. Watch it, understand it before you, I guess, cast judgment. And then, yeah, as a parent, it's up to you to decipher what aspects of that performance you think your child should strive towards.
Yeah.
Because it's not like I'm going to take a bunch of stuff, get out there and break the world record with no work. If you can say to your kid, you know, these are the things that James is doing in his preparation, this is the hard work, the sacrifice, the dedication, the ice baths again, you know, all that stuff. That stuff, sure, model your life on that.
Yeah.
But don't take one aspect out of it and say, what about the kids?
Yeah.
I just think it's a really kind of, and it's been brought up a lot with me, like, what about the kids? I'm like, it's kind of like it's an easy line.
Yeah.
But like no one says to Lewis Hamilton when they're watching Drive to Survive, like, what about the kids?
Yeah.
Just because it's just become an accepted part of performance in that sport.
Yeah.
I think there's a bit of a misconception out there as well when they hear enhanced games. They think that you just take some steroids or something and boom, you're breaking records. Like, you have to put in so much work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To do it. Like, that's what the average person, the average person walking down the street, they're a bit big. Oh, he must be on steroids. He just takes steroids. He doesn't do it. But he lives that life. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta live that life. So,
I keep thinking about it like when I'm training and stuff. What I'm aiming for is the fastest swimmer in history. And I have to keep thinking about that again. Like, I'm going to be the fastest swimmer in history. I'm going to be through the fastest performers in history. And it's not simple.
No.
not at all.
That world record has stood since 2009.
That's wild.
So,
because did you have the fourth fastest 100 meter time?
I had the fastest swim without the suit.
That's
so
right.
in 2009, they wore those awesome suits.
Yeah. All
the world records got broken. The next year, 2010, they banned them.
Yeah.
Then I come through and I'm the fastest in history without that suit.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, like, when we're talking about breaking this record, it's so foreseeable for you, knowing that you owned that with the training that you were doing, the ice bathing that
it's
you're
not
hating.
outrageous.
No, it's not. That's what I mean. Like,
I'm not completely talking
shit.
shit.
This is so feasible. Like, it's so feasible. It's amazing.
And the feasible part of it is, again, to kind of simplify it for people, is I want to get my body back to my 20-year-old self.
Yep.
And
same.
That's all. That's all I believe I need to do.
Yeah.
Because I think with my head on my shoulders and my perspective on performance and all those aspects of it now, all I need is that 20-year-old body back, and I'm good to go.
How did you explain your mentality when you swam the 100? Your first 50, you were savage in the first 50. Like, it was always a faster time in the first 50 than the back end. Like, only by a couple of seconds, but it's a lot in swimming.
Yeah.
Is that why you feel like you feel so much more comfortable in the 50? Like, did you?
I think in Australia we haven't had a huge history in sprinting. So when you were growing up, it was like your Kieran Perkins, Ian Thorpes, Grant Hackett's, all these distance swimmers. So there was this huge tradition of distance swimming. So right the way through my early career, people were always saying you should push out to 200, 400, like do long distance swimming. Like, that's what we're good at.
Yeah.
And all our training methods are around distance swimming. We're actually somewhat novice in sprinting in Australia. We're getting much better now, but so all the methods were geared towards distance swimming. And so I don't think I did specific enough training at certain times in my career to unlock my full athletic ability for those shorter events. And the difference between, like, you get a 400 meter swimmer and like get him to run to the corner of the street and they look like a Gumby.
Yeah.
Whereas if you get any athlete that's powerful enough for a 20-second sprint, they're usually pretty athletic.
Yeah.
But I felt like at times, like, I was dulling that athleticism through swimming 80 kilometers a week in the pool. Like, I'm doing so much stuff at the moment around like high jumps, broad jumps, like a lot of plyometric work that I never did during my career.
Yeah.
And we've been doing like some super interesting testing and stuff around that. And there's so much data out there around that now that, it's really exciting to see what can be done.
It's wild to think how much technology has changed. But since both of you, I mean, have played and trained as well too, like watching sports where it used to be you're a swimmer, swim. Like, do you know what I mean? And now, I mean,
It's
I know
really
you went
weird.
into the gyms
We did this
after.
testing the other day. So we're doing like some jump testing and some force production, upper and lower body.
the force plates are unreal.
Yeah. So we're doing like both upper body stuff, but also jumping and like some different like lower body stuff. And it had all the data from around the world. So we compared it. So in Australia, they had like all the NRL, AFL, rugby, netball, all that stuff. And for that one, I was 98th percentile for power production. And then we put it through American sports, and I was like 58th amongst NBA and NFL.
Wow.
So those NBA and NFL players are producing so much more force. I mean, a lot of them are a lot bigger guys, which just helps for that force production. But that's where we're sitting back now going, well, as an athlete in Australia, I've only really ever compared myself to other athletes in Australia.
Yeah.
Now I'm sitting there going, oh, well, I need to be 100th percentile in Australia, and I need to be up in that 70, 80% when I'm comparing myself to NFL players, like how high they can jump. Or, you know, when you see the NFL combine, like that's where I want to start comparing myself. So all that really cool data that's out there now is like a lot of fun to work on. And like imagine just working on like how high you can jump compared to swimming 80 kilometers in the pool. It's almost different sports.
Well, because what are the sports that are in? It's swimming. There's MMA. So Darcy's still a chance. Is it powerlifting?
Gymnastics.
Weightlifting, track and gymnastics.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
So they kind of simplified it back to the original idea of the Olympics was faster, higher, stronger.
Yeah.
I think it is. And now we've got breakdancing and
handball.
Like, it's gone a bit funky.
Yeah.
That's
we're
where I
mixed
think
in X Games.
Yeah, it's gotten pretty weird. Like breakdancing is getting real weird.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'd feel about sharing a village with breakdancers. Like
well, actually, we haven't even touched on you in the Olympic Village. Darcy.
This is what I was waiting for, right?
Now, speaking of
the most important
dancers,
question so far, right? So the Olympic Village, right?
Yeah.
Personally, if I went in there and there's Colombian girls, Brazilian girls, I'm forgetting what I've done in the last 4 years. Right?
Yeah.
What's it like in there?
What's this?
Canadian girls. What's it like in there?
It's pretty crazy. Like it's its own world. There's very few places in the world like. So the food hall itself would be, say, the size of slightly bigger than a football field, maybe 1.5 football fields. This huge food hall, and it's got all these different stalls with different foods from around the world. So it would be an Australian section. Yeah. It's all like buffet. There's a Macca's with like 20 serving counters. Everything's free. Like so, there's heaps of distractions. But you go in this food hall, you sit down to eat, and to my right might be shot putter from Nigeria that's like 150 kilos and 6'9", and to my left is like a gymnast from China that's like 5'1", and then like it's the only place in the world that I go where there's girls taller than me. Like walking through the village, I see girls taller than me. I'm like, so
making eye contact for the first time.
Yeah, it is the weirdest place, and you're bumping into like the biggest names every day. And it can be a massive wig out.
Is it hard to say, like, you know, obviously you finish at different times during the Olympics? Like, are they trying to party in there when others are still trying to get ready to compete?
So swimming is almost the best in that we start on the first day.
Oh yeah.
So they have the opening ceremony, which we're not allowed to go to, which is like kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
So I've never been to an opening ceremony.
Oh, you'll get your first one in Paris.
Yeah, potentially. So first day we start competing. And that's tough in some ways in that, like in Australia, that's where all our expectations are in swimming. Yeah. But like after 7 days, swimming's done. The Olympics still has 10 days to go, and we're living in the village,
and everything's free.
And beyond everything in the village being free, like you have this accreditation, and you go out into London or Rio or whatever, and doors just open.
Yeah.
So as a swimmer, like that is the best.
Yeah.
That's the best week. It was like schoolies 2.0, pretty much. And then, but going like, so you wake up or get home or whatever and go and watch an event in the day. Like I was on the finish line for Usain Bolt's 100 meters and 200 meters, like right there with my athlete accreditation. Finish there, go to the pub or go to a bar, then go out to a nightclub, and then the night goes. And then the next day you might be watching like, I don't know, some other historic event, and then straight into like a night out again. It's insane.
Well, because it's surreal that one, you were just in a historic event, but then you're also being out there. Like, I would have killed to have watched Usain Bolt live. Like,
Yeah, it's
things
crazy.
like that is just.
I sat next to, like, he was from me that camera away. I sat there and watched him warm up for his 100 meters in Rio, which was his like third gold in a row, like third games in a row. I was just sitting there like this close watching him. And no one else was really watching either. I was like, I'll just go to the track warm-up
just
area.
staring at it.
Because you're an athlete and you got the credit, you can get in anywhere.
Yeah.
So I just sat there and like a couple of the boys, we just watched him like doing some skipping, some dancing and stuff. And then he just rolled out calm as anything. And we went and stood near the finish line and watched him win that race, like with the whole world watching. And so you have moments like that mixed in with basically, like a week of schoolies.
So it's all right.
He's like, why did I play for you? What would have been your Olympic sport?
Oh, geez, I don't know, shot put or something.
Discus.
Discus.
I was a high jumper.
High jump.
So
I
I
can see that.
I would have been happy with that.
Australia's really good at high jump now.
I've still got my under 11 record. No, under 13's record
Yeah,
at Narrabeen.
You a Frosby flopper or a bit of a scissorer?
No, I was. Just to be clear, no scissoring, but thanks for asking.
What about
that was good for you.
I put the ball on the tee there. Frosby. I've still got it standing. So I'm 40 now, and it's still there.
Yeah,
so I
nice.
was going all right until I got the old
The Frosby
stress
flopper
fractures.
is pretty hardcore.
Yeah, I the amount of times I landed on my back on the bar and I had bruises just because
Heavy.
Yeah. Anyway, I just needed to move on from that topic. Darcy, was there anything else you wanted to ask
I'm
while
done.
you're here? Or? See, I told you to
Finish
sing
on the
slower in
scissoring.
the. Well, James, it's been awesome having you on here. I'm looking forward to seeing what other athletes are going to join you eventually. I know there's going to be a few more signing on after Paris, but so excited to see you turn back into a 20-year-old Peter Pan. You're
As
already
you
in
can
the
see,
green.
my mind's still there. I'm still a 20-year-old at mine.
Exactly, Peter Pan, James. Maybe that's a new nickname.
Peter Pan, I like it.
Yeah,
I
well,
like
welcome.
it.
Thanks, Darcy, again, as
Thank you.
always.
Thank
It is a show with no name. Please like, subscribe, and share. And we're always going to bringing on plenty of other sporting talent throughout the year. So make sure you check us out week in, week out.